Hello and welcome to the 10th 2020 NHL Draft recap here at Scouching. Today we're going to be looking at the St. Louis Blues and what they ended up with in this year's draft. And leading the way at 26th overall, they surprised me a little bit by taking Jake Neighbours. With names like Maverick Bourque, Brendan Brisson, even Thomas Bordeleau and Helge Grans left on the board, I was surprised to see the St. Louis Blues go for Jake Neighbours. And to me, Jake Neighbours is a bit of a question mark because he plays like a different style of player than he should be. I think he's a player that's best served for a bottom six energy role, playing hard and chipping in the offensive zone, deep in the offensive zone, like you need a lot of NHL players to do. But he comes across as a player that tries to play with a lot more finesse and speed and skill than I think he really has that can be projectable to the NHL. He showed really good metrics overall, solid transition numbers, but I felt that he was much of a straight line player. He'd go full on into an encounter, and if he gets left behind, he got really left behind and removed from play. He's an interesting project to work on. I think if you can sort of change the way he approaches the game to be more of a physical and intimidating force with some offensive talent on top, I would be really interested to see what he turns out to be. But beyond that, maybe it's just me, but as a first round pick, I have some questions about Jake Neighbours, especially when you look at who they left on the board. At 86th overall, the St. Louis Blues took Dylan Peterson, and similar to a player like Landon Slaggert in the Chicago Blackhawks, I found Dylan Peterson to be one of those guys who would do something on the ice and I'd go, who's that guy? And it was Dylan Peterson a lot of the time. He's a big center, really good skill. I think he moves around the ice really well for someone his size. But again, putting all of those pieces together to become a true offensively dynamic presence, even at the USHL level, seems to be a bit of a shortcoming for him. I think he's got the talent to put together a really nice career. He certainly has a talent profile of that of someone who was drafted higher than him, but just putting all those things together to generate offense and production seemed to be a bit of a problem for him. I don't mind taking a swing on him in the third round, and if you really pushed me, I might have made the same decision, but I think there's just a long way to go for Peterson from here. He'll need a few years to develop and get more comfortable with his size and his skill and his speed, and I think he has a really interesting future as a potential two-way impact center. I just think that he has a long way to go before he gets there. At 88th overall, they took Luff, and I've seen this guy play as well a few times. There's some interesting flashes of skill. He can step up from the blue line well, he generates speed okay, and he's got an okay shot, and his defensive impacts are fine. He just came away as a guy that didn't really move the needle a tremendous amount for me, so I might not have picked him at all in this year's draft, but he does have some good defensive impacts, and his offensive potential is kind of there once in a while. He's got some good fluid footwork pushing up the ice in a straight line, some good skill and mobility to move laterally, but there might not be enough there to be much of an NHL needle mover, especially for a player taken in the third round of this year's draft. At 119th, they took Tanner Dickinson from the Sioux Greyhounds, and this was a player that I didn't see much of going into the draft, so I've gone back since the draft to look at some tape. He's fine. He's got some good skill. He plays hard, works hard, gets to the net. I don't know what he's going to turn out to be. I really liked Rory Cairns with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. Robert Calisti and Billy Constantino on the back end, I thought enabled a lot of offensive play for Tanner Dickinson. But I mean, he's a guy who can get to the net, plays hard with some good skill. He knows how to put the puck in the net from time to time, and he might be an interesting bet. Again, not a guy I had on my list as a guy that I'd really be looking for, and I thought there were other players on the Sioux Greyhounds that I would have looked at ahead of Dickinson, but he didn't play much, and per minute on the ice he produced okay, so we'll see what happens over the next couple of seasons. At 150th, the St. Louis Blues took Matt Kessel, a 20-year-old defenseman who plays in the NCAA right now. I've seen him play a little bit since the draft, and I've never really come away seeing something that could be a potential steal in the draft. I don't know what it is that they see in him, but they must see something. He was a net negative offensive player at even strength at UMass, and he was a net negative defensive player at UMass as well, but his overall defensive goals against rate was pretty solid on its own. So to take him in the 5th round, even as a flyer to me, considering who was left on the board, might have been a bit high, but I guess the St. Louis Blues see something in him that I don't, and I guess that's okay. The Blues then took powerhouse team, the Ottawa 67's backup goaltender Will Cranley with their 163rd overall pick. Again, a goalie. When I looked at instat metrics on him, he underperformed what was expected of him on a really, really strong team, so I'm not sure what future he has on this team. I found Cendric Andre to be a better goaltender from the games that I saw, even if he's a little bit undersized. But again, he's a goalie, 163rd overall, had a really good team in front of him. I don't know, we'll see what happens, but I wasn't particularly thrilled to see a player like that go off the board. Then at 194th, the St. Louis Blues closed out their draft by drafting Noah Beck. I had no idea who this player was, so I had to go look at some tape. He was undrafted last season, and I wasn't particularly impressed with his play on the Fargo Force. He's not very strong on his feet, his skating isn't great, but his defensive impacts in the USHL were pretty solid, but you kind of expect that out of a big defenseman who was undrafted last year and is still in the USHL as a 19-year-old. He's heading to Clarkson University, which I guess is a fine program, but between him and Matt Kessel, I really saw those two picks as players where the St. Louis Blues went, big right-hand shot defenseman, we need them now. And I'm not sure that's the best draft strategy, especially considering what I saw out of Noah Beck. Am I calling him a useless draft pick? Absolutely not. I just think there's a long way to go for him based on what I've seen since the draft, but I guess you can't complain too much about whatever happens at 194th overall in the NHL Draft. I just feel that there were players that they left on the board that ended up going undrafted that might have been better swings that show more right now. So for the St. Louis Blues, I really had trouble judging their overall draft crop, but I think when you look at what they left on the board when they drafted the players they did, I have to give them a 3F. There's a really big breadth of potential talent here. I don't really expect too much out of names like Matt Kessel, Noah Beck, or Leo Luff, especially considering who was on the board when they picked them. Dylan Peterson is an interesting project, but I think he has a little bit of a ways to go to put together the whole package. But if he does, he could be a really good player. Jake Neighbours, I think, could be an NHL player, like he should if he's a 26th overall pick, but nothing more than a bottom six energy player that has some ability to chip in offensively here and there. And when you look at the offensive dynamos like Brennan Brisson, Ozzy Weisblatt, and Maverick Bourque that went off the board almost immediately after Neighbours, they might have left some really good value on the board that was right in front of them. And also maybe you got a goalie in Will Cranley. I don't know, I'm no expert on goaltending. So that's it for the 10th draft recap for 2020. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You'll get access to a Discord server, early access to videos, spreadsheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies, or you can pick up some merch from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and we'll see you in the next one where we profile the Detroit Red Wings.